Some stories linger in the shadows, waiting to be told. Mine begins in a place both ordinary and unsettling. I live on the outskirts of Austin, in a quiet suburb where the houses sit far apart, separated by stretches of overgrown yards and empty lots. Life out here is slower, quieter. You don't hear much traffic, and when the sun sets, the whole neighborhood sinks into a kind of stillness that can feel almost too deep. When I first moved in, I thought it was perfect, peaceful, away from the constant noise of the city. My nearest neighbors were an older couple who lived in the house right next to mine. They kept to themselves, but I'd see them sometimes, tending their yard or unloading groceries. Then, only a few months after I moved in, they were gone. No one really said why. One day, their car was packed, the window shut tight, and the house was locked up. Since then, it's been empty. Years have passed, and not a single person has gone in or out. The windows are dark, the porch sags, and the door has remained bolted. I've lived in this quiet neighborhood for nearly 10 years, and for the most part, life here has been uneventful. The trees are tall, the air is still, and the neighbors usually keep to themselves. But right next to my house, pressed so close that the shadow of its roof stretches across my yard every evening, there is a house that no one dares to claim. A house abandoned, boarded up, yet somehow never silent. From the outside, you'd think it was just another forgotten structure. Paint peeling, windows clouded with dust, the porch sagging under the weight of time. The grass grows tall and unkempt, and ivy crawls along the bricks like veins of something sick. Kids in the neighborhood used to ride their bikes past it, daring each other to run up the creaking steps and touch the front door. They'd scream and laugh, but not one of them ever lingered more than a few seconds. Adults, though, we didn't laugh. We avoided even looking at it when we could. Because if you stared too long, if you let your gaze wander to those blackened windows, you might see something move. It always begins the same way. A whisper, so faint, you think it's just the wind pushing the... But the wind doesn't form words, not like these. I've been out on my back porch at night, enjoying a smoke, when I've heard it, a hiss of breath, a thread of voices tangled together. Some high, some low, all layered like a chorus of people speaking behind a wall. You lean in, straining to catch a single word, but the moment you do, it dies away, leaving the night too quiet, too still. The first time I heard it, I brushed it off. Old houses make noises, I told myself. Wood shifts, air whistles. But then came the shadows. It was late, close to midnight. I was closing my blinds when I saw it, a figure drifting across the upstairs window of that house. Not walking, drifting. Its outline was hazy, like smoke caught in moonlight, but I could tell it was shaped like a person. I froze at my window, heart hammering against my ribs. I wanted to convince myself it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection. But reflections don't pause. Reflections don't stop in the middle of the window and turn their head as if they're looking right at you. I dropped my blinds so fast, I nearly tore them off. That night, I didn't sleep. I told no one. Who would believe me? The house had been empty for decades. Every neighbor said so. No one went in, no one came out. And yet, when the night grew deep, I swore I could see faint flickers of light. Tiny flames dancing behind the broken shutters. Candlelight. Soft, yellow, pulsing. At first, I thought maybe squatters had found their way inside, though the doors were all chained and the windows nailed shut. But the longer I watched, the more I realized something was wrong. The light wasn't steady like a candle should be. It trembled, flickering as if being carried by someone walking from room to room. And sometimes, this is what chilled me the most, it would stop dead, right at the edge of the glass, hovering there like an eye pressed against the pane. The house had a heartbeat, and it was watching me. Days passed, but I couldn't shake the weight of it. Whenever I stepped outside, I felt its presence. I'd catch myself glancing at the windows, half dreading, half expecting to see a face staring back. Even when nothing was there, the silence pressed too heavy, like the whole building was holding its breath. And then came the night of the storm. The sky split open with thunder, rain hammering the roofs until gutters overflowed. I lay in bed, listening to the downpour, when I heard it again. That voice. Only this time, it wasn't faint. It was clear, sharp, slipping through the rain as if the water carried it straight into my room. A whisper right at my ear. "Do you hear us?" I shot upright, heart clawing its way up my throat. My bedroom was empty, but the voice hadn't been in my head. I knew it hadn't. It came from outside, from the direction of the house next door. Against all reason, I pulled back my curtain. The storm blurred everything into streaks of gray and black, but through the sheets of rain, I saw it again. The light. A dim golden glow moving slowly from one window to the next. It flickered, swayed, then stopped. Lightning split the sky, white and violent. For a single second, the upstairs window lit up in full, and there they were. 3 figures standing side by side. Pale faces pressed to the glass, hollow eyes staring into me. And in that brief flash, I realized the worst part. They weren't inside looking out. They were on the wrong side of the glass, faces pressed from outside in. The thunder shook the walls, the light died, and when my eyes adjusted again, the window was empty. I slammed the curtain shut and stumbled back, breath ragged. My hands trembled so hard I could barely grip the fabric. I didn't open the curtain again that night. I didn't dare. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had been the storm, my imagination twisting shadows and lightning into horrors. But deep down, I knew better. There was something in that house, something that wasn't bound by its walls. It seeped out, through glass, through whispers, through the cracks of silence in the night. And it had noticed me. I tried to ignore it. I tried to go about my life, but ignoring a thing doesn't make it vanish. If anything, it seemed to feed on my denial. The voices grew louder, the shadows lingered longer. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps pacing in the empty yard, the sound of shoes crunching gravel that was never disturbed. Then, one night, I made a mistake. I looked too long. I was standing at my sink, washing a glass, when something caught the corner of my eye. A flicker in the window. I should have turned away, shut the blinds, walked upstairs, and buried myself under the covers. But I didn't. I looked. And in that window, framed by rot and ivy, was a candle. It burned low, its flame crooked and weak, and behind it stood a man. At least I think it was a man. His face was too pale, stretched too tight, as if it had been painted onto his skull. His eyes were nothing but pits of darkness. And yet, he smiled, wide, sharp, unnatural. He lifted his hand slowly, raising it in a gesture of greeting. And I swear to you, I swear on everything I have left. He whispered my name. From that moment on, the house no longer felt distant. It became aware of me. Every night, the presence grew heavier, closer, as if the walls between my house and that one had thinned. I began hearing the whispers, even indoors. Washing dishes, brushing my teeth, lying in bed. They would seep through, curling under doors, slipping through vents. At first, they were faint. Then, they grew sharp, insistent. "Come closer. We see you. We've been waiting." Sometimes they laughed, a low, guttural chuckle that made the hair on my arms stand stiff. Sometimes they wept, soft and broken, as though dozens of unseen throats mourned behind my walls. One night, my curiosity, or maybe something darker, dragged me to the window again. The candlelight was there, faint, golden, swaying gently as if carried through the hallways. It slid from room to room, pausing sometimes, as though whoever held it was listening. My chest tightened when I realized it was climbing upward, toward the attic window that faced my own bedroom. I wanted to close the curtain, to shut it out, but I couldn't. My eyes locked on the glow as it neared the top floor. Then, suddenly, the flame vanished. Darkness swallowed the window. And then, with no flicker of movement, no sound of footsteps, the candle appeared again, already in the attic window, just a few feet from where I stood. I stumbled back, my body slamming against the dresser. The glass of water I'd left there toppled, shattering across the floor. My pulse thundered, ears ringing. In the dim glow of that flickering light, a face leaned into view. The same pale man, smiling wider than before, his jaw unhinging unnaturally, as if his grin could split his face in two. And behind him, shadows moved. Dozens. Some tall, some hunched, their outlines blurry, shivering, like smoke trapped in glass. They were crowded against the window, pressing forward, all of them straining to look at me. The candle blew out. Darkness fell, heavy and suffocating. That was the first night I heard footsteps in my own house. They came from the hallway, slow, dragging, the creak of weight shifting on old wood. My throat locked, my breath shallow, as I sat frozen on the edge of my bed. The steps drew closer, deliberate, until they stopped right outside my bedroom door. Silence stretched. Then, 3 knocks. Soft, polite. I don't remember moving, but somehow I ended up clutching a kitchen knife, back-pressed into the far corner of my room, staring at the door. I didn't sleep until dawn. When morning came, the world seemed normal again. The house next door sat quiet, still, lifeless. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that whatever lived there had crossed a line, seeped into my space. The next few nights blurred together in a haze of terror. Objects shifted in my home, a chair angled differently, a picture frame turned toward the wall, the sound of glass clinking softly in the dark when nothing was there. My lights flickered, bulbs dying one after another, no matter how often I replaced them. And the whispers, they no longer lingered at the edge of hearing. They hissed directly in my ear, so close I could feel the warmth of breath that didn't exist. One night, as I sat curled on my couch, too afraid to move, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of laughter. Children's laughter, high-pitched, playful, echoing from the walls of the house next door. But the house had no children, no family, no one. Drawn by something I can't explain, I found myself at my own front door. My hand trembled as I turned the knob, stepping barefoot onto the damp grass. The night was still, the moon heavy and pale overhead. The abandoned house loomed beside me, darker than the shadows themselves. The laughter echoed again, spilling from the cracks in its walls. And there, through the grime-streaked downstairs window, I saw movement. Small figures darting across the room, too quick to catch fully, but their shapes were wrong. Limbs too long, heads tilted at impossible angles. I should have run. I should have gone back inside, locked my doors, and prayed for morning. But instead, I drifted forward, drawn like an insect to flame. I reached the edge of the porch. The wood groaned beneath my weight, and the laughter stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, one by one, every candle in the house flared to life. Dozens of them. Upstairs, downstairs, behind broken shutters and shattered glass. Each window glowed with a trembling flame, until the house blazed like a beacon of the dead. And in every window, faces, not one or two, not a handful, but dozens. Pale, hollow-eyed, grinning with mouths too wide. Men, women, children, all pressed against the glass, watching me. Their voices rose together, a hiss of whispers that blurred into words. "Come inside." I staggered back, my legs nearly giving out. My chest felt tight, my vision swam, and I realized, with a horror that cut me to the bone, some part of me wanted to obey. Some part of me wanted to step forward, open the door, and cross into that flickering glow. I turned and ran. Back inside my house, I locked every door, bolted every window, and curled up in my bedroom with the lights on. But the damage was done. That night, I dreamed of them. In my dream, I stood inside the abandoned house. The walls dripped with damp, the floorboards bowed under my feet. The air stank of rot and wax. Candles burned in every corner, their flames leaning toward me as though reaching. The pale man stood in the center of the room. He smiled, his jaw splitting wider and wider until the corners of his mouth tore into his cheeks. From the black pit of his mouth, dozens of whispers poured out, overlapping until my head rang with them. I woke screaming, the sound of those whispers still echoing in my ears. And when I sat up, gasping, I saw it, on my dresser. A candle, burning. The candle burned on my dresser for what felt like hours. Its flame was small, trembling, but it never died. I didn't light it. I didn't own it. Yet there it was, wax pooling slowly, smoke curling faintly upward, filling the room with the sharp, acrid scent of something old. Something wrong. I didn't move. I couldn't. My breath rasped, shallow and uneven, as I stared at that flickering light. And then I realized my window was still closed, my door still locked. There was no way anyone had entered, which meant only one thing. The house next door no longer cared about walls, about locks, about distance. It was inside. I don't remember falling asleep. At some point, my exhaustion must have dragged me under, though I can't imagine how. But when I woke, the candle was gone. No wax, no smoke, no trace it had ever been there. Only the faint imprint of soot on the wood remained, like a scar. For days after, I avoided the windows. I walked through my house with my head down, my blinds drawn, trying to pretend nothing had happened. But the whispers grew bolder. They spoke in daylight now, curling around my ears even as the sun blazed overhead. They no longer hid in shadows. They followed me from room to room. And sometimes I'd catch movement in the corner of my eye, a pale hand curling around the edge of a door frame, a face leaning just beyond the reflection of a mirror. Each time I turned to look, it would vanish. But the chill it left behind was real. I thought about leaving, selling my home, packing up, vanishing overnight. But I knew, even as the thought crossed my mind, that it wouldn't matter. Whatever bound me to that house, whatever had chosen me, would follow. Distance was meaningless to something that existed between shadows. Then came the night I broke. It was around 3 a.m., that hour when the world feels stretched thin, when silence is heaviest. I was in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the faint sound of whispering in the walls, when I heard a noise that froze me cold. The front door creaked open, not in my dream, not in my imagination. I heard the chains slide, the hinges groan. Someone, or something, had entered. I sat up, pulse hammering, ears straining. Footsteps shuffled across the hardwood floor, slow, deliberate, heading deeper inside. I wanted to run, to hide, to call someone, anyone, but my body wouldn't obey. I could only sit, rigid and trembling, as the sound of movement drew closer. And then, from the darkness of my hallway, I saw it. The glow of a candle. It floated forward, soft and trembling, illuminating nothing but itself, until a figure stepped into view. The pale man. His face was stretched, skin too tight, eyes sunken pits of shadow. That smile carved across his face, endless, splitting wider as he tilted his head. He raised a hand, and in a voice like 1,000 whispers layered into one, he said, "Come home." My body moved without permission. I rose from the bed, feet dragging across the floor. Every muscle screamed, every instinct begged me to stop. But something inside had been hooked, pulled like a fish on a line. I followed him, down the hallway, down the stairs, out the front door. The night was heavy, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. The house next door stood waiting, every window alive with flickering light. Dozens of faces pressed against the glass, grinning, watching as I crossed the yard. The pale man led me up the steps, his candle burning low. The door, though chained and boarded for years, stood wide open, gaping like a mouth. Inside, the air was cold, damp, thick with the smell of rot. Candles lined every surface, their flames bending as though leaning toward me. Shadows writhed along the walls, shifting and twisting into shapes that almost looked human. Almost. The whispering filled the air, layered, endless, pressing into my skull. I staggered forward, hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voices were inside, vibrating through bone, spilling behind my eyes. And then, in the center of the room, I saw them. Not just the pale man, but dozens more. Figures pale as wax, thin as paper, their eyes black voids, their mouths stretched into endless smiles. They crowded together, their movements twitching, jerking, unnatural, as if strings were being pulled by unseen hands. "Why me?" I tried to ask, though my voice came out cracked, broken. The pale man tilted his head. His smile stretched wider still, tearing his cheeks into red lines. And in that terrible, many-voiced chorus, they answered, "Because you listened." The room convulsed with sound. The walls shook, the candles flared, shadows swarmed toward me. I felt them pressing, clawing, wrapping cold fingers around my throat. The last thing I remember is falling forward into the sea of pale faces, into the glow of 100 flickering candles. Their hands reached out, cold and eager, pulling me down, down into the dark. And now, every night, if you stand outside that house and listen, you'll hear another voice among the whispers. Mine.